Feel it.
Should I close the garage door?
No.
It's hot in here.
That's why the door's open. Let a little bit of that sweet Colorado air in here. All right. So it looks like everything is working.
98 waiting.
You never know. You just never know with these live broadcasts. So hopefully everything is working. And Millie, if you're coming in, just come in. Take your time, though. Such a dork. Okay. So we'll get started in a couple seconds. I just wanted to make sure everybody can hear us and see us, and we'll get rolling. So Nicole will try not to let her walk through here. There's wires everywhere. Nicole's going to grab questions from the chat room and add those in, pepper them in. Millie, get,
Sit. Come on, sit.
Yeah, so don't even bother with that like button. So Nicole will grab those questions and add them in as we talk about what we're going to talk about.
Oh, somebody said, if you don't have audio,
okay.
Oh, well, you can't hear me anyway.
It's Earl. It sounds like, well, if one person has it and one person doesn't, then there's not much we can do about it.
Check your mute button.
Check the mute.
The mute.
Yeah, check the mute button. Like all of my points, they're all moot. Jim says he's got nothing. Well, we're definitely outputting audio.
Well, and Earl said he has it now.
Okay. Well, in that case, we're just going to get started here. So, welcome everybody to another great guild meeting. This time we are going to talk about, do you know what we're going to talk about? Estimating board feet and purchasing lumber. And this came about from a question that someone emailed me recently. I didn't ask for permission, so I'm not going to say his name. But I can read you that email and why I think this is a cool thing to cover. So he says, "Hey Mark, I'm still newish to woodworking and I'm going to my local hardwood store to pick up wood for two projects that I've lined up, the barrister's bookcase and the gaming table. I've wrapped my head around what a board foot is and how to do a rough calculation, but I read something recently that has me concerned that I'd be buying enough wood, mostly regarding waste material when dealing with knots, checking, and the like. The person had recommended getting as much as twice the amount of calculated board feet. That seems really high and expensive. How many board feet do I actually need to get for a given project? Is it just the net board feet with the 10 to 20% buffer? Is the buffer just for waste cuts and small mistakes? What about the width of the boards that you get from the hardwood store? Is it just you get what you get, or you have to ask for specific widths? So I thought this was a great question because I won't even say new woodworkers. I think all woodworkers, when you go to buy lumber, you're posed with this challenge of, do I get really specific about it, or can I keep it really general? And the risk of being general is over or under buying. What's so funny?
They can hear Millie tip-tapping around.
Yeah, so we got to trim those nails. Okay.
So I'm going to go take care of her.
Okay.
So you do your thing.
Yeah, I'm
you
good
do
to
your
go.
thing.
I'm good to go.
Come on, Millie.
Get out of here, girl. She's going to mess something up. Go, 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 go. So I have two ways that I do this when I buy lumber. One of them is the lazy way, and this is actually what I do most of the time, and that is give myself that buffer. Either buy 20% more. Sometimes I just kind of lose count and I just buy a whole bunch. And the reason is because I want extra material laying around so I could either include knots or move around knots, include sapwood or remove sapwood, whatever my strategy is. You need a lot of extra material to be able to pull that stuff off. And I think when you do board feet plus, let's say 20%, that might give you a little bit of ability to avoid check ends, to avoid really nasty knots, but I don't think you can get too picky. Even with 20% extra, most of the time when you're buying these boards, you're not necessarily going to get everything you want out of it, and you're not going to be able to say, oh, this grain doesn't quite match the grain on this board. You just can't get too picky. I actually think board foot plus 20% is a pretty minimal approach and might bite you in the butt sometimes. So for me, I like to overbuy. I've got the, number one, I budget for it, so I make sure I have enough to get that extra material, and I've got some space to store it. So because of those reasons, I don't mind extra. I'm okay, and plus having extra just means I could be that much more picky about painting with grain. So that's the way I do it most of the time, but that's not the only way. And you could certainly get more specific if you are trying to be strategic, if you're on a budget, if you don't have room to store a bunch of extra wood, you're gonna wanna be more specific about it. And the technique really relies on going board by board. Now, the bigger the project is, the harder this is to do because there's so many parts and pieces. But I'm going to give you an example that'll be a very basic table, right? So it's nothing too complicated. The measurements are all very simplified, just to give you an example of how we go from this general board foot thing, which doesn't account for any flaws or widths or anything like that. You go from that to a very strategic, I need one of these boards, one of these boards, and one of these boards. All right, so I have another camera set up here, which would be kind of nice. First thing you want to do is make a rough cut list, right? And you want to make sure you know, well, if you're doing a guild project, you probably already have a nice little cut list, but you need to know what you need and the finished dimensions of that. So once you have that cut list, you can group parts. So of course, in cut list, you're usually going to find your legs, your aprons, things that are like parts will be together. And it's a real good idea to get these parts from the same board or very near each other on the same board. And that will allow you to have good color, grain, continuity, things like that. So by grouping these together, we're already getting ourselves into a position where we might be able to say, 4 aprons of this dimension, how might I be able to break up a board so I can be sure that it includes that? We can also start to give ourselves minimum and maximum. So for instance, with a 3-inch wide apron, chances are I'm not going to be buying 3-inch wide stock. I mean, you might, but a lot of times it's like, 6 inches plus. Well, that's great, because if I have a 3-inch apron and I can get myself like a 6 1/4 board, I know I might be able to get 2 side by side out of that, and now my aprons are really going to match up nicely. So when I have a cut list, I will start to do a few things. Number one, I remind myself of a couple of rules that's just kind of handy if you are thinking about board feet as you're at the lumber place. Number one, if you see a 6-inch wide board that's 96 inches long, 8 foot. This is a very typical board that you're going to find when you go for lumber. 6-inch wide, 8 feet long. That is a number you should memorize. Sorry. That's four board feet. As you can see, my memory isn't quite so good. I have an excuse. I injured my hand.
Or if it says it's time to judge your handwriting abilities.
Yeah, well, it's not very good. I don't have that. I don't have the swoopy S's like Cremona has. Actually, I don't even know how he writes. So anyway, 4 board feet for a 6-inch wide by 96. Now, if you go for an 8-quarter board, very common size that you're going to find again, same dimension, 6 inches wide, 96. But if it's 8-quarter, here, let's put 4-quarter up here, you're going to be looking at double, 8 board feet. So this is just going to help you just in ballparking price, what you're going to spend. All right, so let's draw out a board. And this is actually part of my strategy. I will take a piece of paper, just like this, and this is clearly not to scale. Okay, this is 8 feet by roughly 6 inches, hopefully a little bit more. We'll say 6-inch plus. If we can do that, now I've got my 3-inch aprons. Let's lay those out, right? So we'll go with a cut right down the middle. Mind you, what am I going to avoid here? Probably going to avoid a 6-inch or less board. If it's 6 inches or less, that really increases my waste because I can only get 3. I can only use 3 out of this. So 6 inches plus 6 1/4 is probably the minimum for something like this. This is how I would go about it. 16 inches long is the length of the apron, so we can go boom, boom. Right now we have all 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This was 16 inches long. This is 16 inches. And so far we've only utilized 32 inches of our board, leaving us with, quick math here, 64 inches, right? So all 4 aprons are very near one another. They are coming out of the same material, color matched, grain matched, at least relatively grain matched, and I still have all of this extra material. So when I go shopping, to make sure my aprons are satisfied, I am absolutely going to be looking for a 6 1/4 plus wide board of at least 8 feet in length. Well, length we haven't really fully decided on yet, but it's going to probably come about 8 feet, maybe sometimes a little bit longer.
Chris York wants to know, when thinking about board foot, is the finished thickness is less than 4 by 4?
Okay, let me read that. I'm trying to do the version that you're reading. When thinking about board feet and the finished thickness is less than 4/4, do you opt for an 8-quarter board versus a 4/4? Not really. Like in this case here, Chris, if this is a 3/4 inch board, if it's anything greater than 3/4 of an inch called for in the plan, you might need to go for a 5/4 or 6/4, which would be a little bit wasteful, but 5/4 should cover it. You don't necessarily, for anything that's within the realm of what 4/4 can do, which is like 3/4, maybe if you're really, really lucky and you buy it really rough, you might be able to get 7/8 out of it. That should all be 4/4 stock. Anything thicker than that, and you start to go to 1 1¼ inches thick, you definitely need to go to a thicker board to accomplish that. So I then start to look around and say, okay, well now I have this 64" by maybe 6 1/4 wide or a little bit more. What else can I do with that? Well, I do have a top here. And my top is 18 inches by 18 inches. It's a nice little square, and it is 3/4, so I can get it out of this stock potentially. And again, this, we don't know exactly what this board has in it. There may be an ugly knot here that we need to avoid, so we're gonna maybe cut that piece out or something. But either way, we would start measuring down. Okay, we have 6 inches. We go 18, 18, and 18. And altogether that is what, 48? So to get all 3 of those, we had 64 to play with. I'm going to consume 48 because I'm doing 3 18s here. And I even have room to get rid of that ugly knot by doing this because I've only done 48 inches. Man, I hope my math is right. Because I've only done 40.
Hey, we got a bunch of people watching. They're probably...
Yeah, they would correct me if it was wrong. And here's the other thing. 6 inches, 6 inches, 6 inches. When I put these 3, obviously this is nothing even remotely to scale. 6 times 3 is 18. I'm going to get my 18 by 18 out of this board. So one single board, strategically oriented, is giving me everything for my top and my aprons.
Chris brings up a point. It's worth mentioning whether or not the dealer is selling 4S boards or rough cut. A little more planning and strategy needed, I would think.
How
rough is the board?
I don't know how that would affect your strategy though. I mean, the only thing, if you buy a pre-surfaced board, I feel like that actually helps you with your strategy because you can see everything. It's
Right.
very clear. If you're buying material that's really, really rough, you may not notice something until you get it planed at home and you go, oh crap, there's a big check in there and I got to cut it out. So if you are buying pre-surfaced stuff, I feel like that's only going to make your life easier, but more expensive. And ultimately, I don't like doing that because if the board is no longer flat, you are out of options if it's already milled. All right, so we have some legs that we still need to do. Well, this one is a little unexciting. You're going to have to buy 8/4 to get legs like that. If you could find some place that has 8/4 shorts, if you don't want extra, try to get it out of the, try to get a short bin.
It says it's 50. It says it's 54, not 48.
Where?
Up there, 48.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Whatever. It's less than 64. Come on, guys. Don't give me too much crap. So where am I? Okay, yeah, so if you have to buy this 8/4 to satisfy your legs, you may wind up with some extra. That's just, it happens, and it's not a bad thing because you can use it on the next project. But if we have a 1 3/4 inch wide leg, let's say just ballpark, let's round that up to 2 to make it easy math. You could do 2 inches, 2 inches. And now ideally, if you can get 1, 2, 3, and 4, all of your legs out of the same board. So to do that, I estimated, I rounded that up to 2 inches. So you would need, maybe a 7 to 8 inch board. You might be able to get all 4 of those legs side by side and only take up a 28 inch length, right? And if you have a full 8-foot board or something, you're just gonna have a ton extra. Now, if you can't find something that's 7 or 8 inches wide, maybe it's only 6 inches wide, well, then you really only have one option. You're gonna get 3 of your legs out of one part, and then after you make that 28 inch cut, then you're gonna get leg number 4 out of this part here.
So because I am working on the website and looking at broken links, I came across a link on our main website for the Cutlist Plus viewer.
Okay.
So, and that's a diagram. It's like you work with it. And is that kind of
Cutlists,
what you're doing here?
Yeah, they certainly can help with stuff like that. So you take basic measurements, you input the measurements, then you tell it what size material you have, and then it puts that, basically makes the best use out of it. That's really, really handy for plywood, where there's more predictability. You don't have to navigate around problems. So that actually brings me to, to the main point here. You could do all this prep work, but when you're buying material, you have to be able to think on the fly. So what I like to do is have my cut list with me. I've got my approximate board requests, like my wish list for what I hope they have, and I try to find those. If I can't find those with the grain that I want and everything I'm looking for, then I just have to deviate from the plan. And that means I have to maybe buy a board that's a little narrower than I wanted. So now I have to buy an extra board to get those other pieces out of it. If I'm building a tabletop, I like to be pretty picky about where those boards come from. So I'm going to be able to pick those out, but again, changing my plan on the fly if they don't have exactly what I hoped that they have. So it's just one of those things. You got to be ready to look at these numbers, bring your tape measure, even bring a calculator. I mean, we've all got them on our phones. So you can make some quick decisions right then and there. Now, I found at most lumber dealers, they are not standing over your shoulder. You know, most of the time they'll get a stack of material down and you could spend all day there picking through that pile. Maybe not all day. Take your time, you know, take the time to pick the right stuff, because it just sucks to have to go back and just get one more board because you didn't have enough and you make a poor decision because you're in a rush. So as long as they're not standing over your shoulder going, all right, dude, come on, I got other things to do, you should be okay just taking your time and making smart choices.
Tim JB wants to know, if your local supplier only have pre-surface S2S or S3S and not rough cut, should you buy a quarter thicker than needed for that specific project?
Only if you need to. If the stuff that they've milled to whatever extent, sometimes it's surface 2 sides, 3 sides, 4 sides. The more surfaced it is, the fewer choices you have.
Is that what the S2 means? Surface?
Surface 2 sides, surface 3 sides. So if you find this stuff pre-surfaced but it's in good condition, okay, you're fine. Take the board, sight down it. You know, take a look and see how warped is it? Is there cupping? What are you going to have to do to this thing to get it nice and flat when you get it back to the shop? If it's pretty straight, then you're good to go. So yeah, there are times, for instance, I'm doing a tabletop and I want it to be like, you know, Jason's dining table. You know, I didn't really want it to be a really thin top. That's a bad example because I use thicker material for that. But something that I really wanted to have more of a 7/8 appearance. I know that if I buy, I don't know, S3S 4/4 stock, I'm not getting 7/8 out of that. I'm lucky to get 3/4 out of it if I'm doing a big tabletop, because I'm probably going to wind up surfacing that stuff one more time when I get home and I'm going to lose the thickness. Right? So that's a case where I would bump it up to 5/4 to be absolutely sure that I wind up with what I want. It's a little bit more expensive, but it can be good for that special project if you really need to.
Eric says, how much hardness does hardness factor into your decisions when you have to make the choice on the fly? Hickory in Kentucky is relatively cheap, but much harder and heavier stock and wear on tools.
Well, I usually am not making an on-the-fly decision about wood species when I'm at the lumber yard. I'm there to buy the wood species I've already set my mind on. The only time I have to do that is if something just isn't what I want. If I can't find the material I'm looking for, or they're out of something, then I have to make a choice and switch gears, but that doesn't usually happen very often. So hardness in terms of this conversation doesn't really play into it at all. I've already made that choice when I was back in the shop. But if you're going to the lumber yard and you are looking for project material, and you're just kind of window shopping, and you go, well, I know I want to make this thing, but I just want to see the menu of items. Hardness absolutely plays into it, just because it's going to fight you back. You know, the harder the species, the more it rattles on power tools and the harder it is on your blades. That said, don't ever let that stop you from using it. That's what these tools are for. They're there to cut through wood, get dull, be resharpened, and then get used again. If you see something that's an attractive species, go ahead and use it. And actually, in a lot of cases, maybe not the super hardwoods, but I really prefer a denser species over one that's, you know, lighter. Now, if you were a hand tool user, exclusive hand tools, you want those woods that work a little bit easier. But I like a wood that takes a nice chisel cut and it's nice and crisp and clean, as opposed to one that kind of crushes, the fibers crush as you cut through them.
Jacob had a question about how you source figured woods.
Well, locally we have a place, Austin Hardwoods, they sometimes have figured material there that I could pick up. Other times, figured wood is a great thing to buy online, because you can go to a place like Bell Forest and you might be able to find actual pictures, like board by board. So when it's really nicely figured stuff, a lot of times they will inventory those. Exotic lumber. Well, figured stuff, not just exotic. He's looking for figured, like right down there.
Yeah, this one right here.
That one looks figured. Anyway, so you may be able to find images and they'll give you all the specs, everything you need to know about it. And you just, you know, the pictures usually are fairly accurate for what you're going to get. And you can buy that stuff online. And I think for the really special material like that, that's not a bad way to go, especially if you can't find it local.
Don't forget, because some people don't realize that you have vendor discounts as part of your guild membership. So when you log into the website and underneath your name in the top right-hand corner, there's a drop down and it says discounts.
Discounts.
And there's a Bell Forest 10% off discount in there. And in fact, somebody just asked me about Bell Forest. Where'd it go? Well, I'll get to that one. I'll find it. This one, Robert has a question here.
Okay, Robert says, how would you approach estimating board feet when ordering online? Don't have a good lumber dealer near me, and online is sometimes the only option.
Oh, board foot. I thought you said Bell Forest, BF.
Right. In that case, Robert, you're kind of screwed. I mean, if they allow you to pick boards online, probably not the case if you're just buying like regular standard stock. You could call, maybe ask them what their widths are, what their lengths are, get an idea of what they're going to be sending you, and then maybe do some of this stuff. Try to see if they tell you all their stuff is 6-inch and over, and they're going to ship it out. It's going to be full 8-foot boards or 6-foot boards, or they can do like a single cut for you, and because that's a big deal too. If well, actually, if they cut it at 2 and send me the 6, cut it at 2 feet. And then I have a 6-foot section and a 2-foot section, and that works better for my project. They might be able to accommodate that for you. So find out what they have if they give you that information, and then do your best to get an estimation. I would still do the board by board thing to see that it's going to work for you, and then just do a board foot calculation and see, I don't know, maybe throw a board or two extra in there just so that you have it.
I know we brought up Bell Forest, but we also have another discount with CR Muter Spa.
Yes.
He doesn't have a coupon code, but he's a small vendor that you could actually call and talk to, and you tell him you're a guild member, and he'll give you the discount. And I put a link to his website.
That's great.
And again, underneath the discounts is the process.
Chris wants to know if Austin Hardwoods would let me do a video there, showing my thought process and how what you do when you run into challenges. Yeah, they would. It's more of a question of whether I would do it. I would have to do it when no one is around. I don't like doing this in front of an audience. Not my favorite thing at all. So yeah, I mean, I actually do have plans on doing a video. Not that, but I wanted to do like a tour of Austin Hardwoods, but make it a very informative tour. Randy, the guy that I work with over there, is so well informed on where the wood comes from, how it's sourced, where it's grown, why they buy what they buy. Really, really good information that I think is just fascinating. So if I could find a time to get my butt over there, hopefully before it gets cold again, and actually get a tour, that'd be fantastic.
That'd be fun.
You guys want to hear something really stupid? So I have been great with my hand. Everything's been fantastic. I worked today and yesterday. I'm taking it easy, not doing anything stupid, but everything's been going great. And really very little pain whatsoever. And tonight, after work, I went and rode my bike, I went and got changed, I come out of the bedroom, I feel something on my left hand. That's the one that had the surgery. And I look down, turns out it was just a giant horsefly. But I looked down.
Leaving the doors open to let the dogs in and out.
Right, so there's more flying creatures in the house. But I was going through the hallway where it's a little bit dark, and all I saw was this black blob on my hand. Now I'll use my good hand to do it. I did one of these. I went, like that, with my 1-week-old surgery hand, now. And it's swollen up, and it's bad news. I called the nurse at the hand specialist place, and she's like, it should be okay, just if the swelling doesn't go down or if it gets worse, let us know. But now I'm in pain, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I was doing so well, and then a friggin' fly freaks me out. And I react to it. I was seeing stars for a minute. It was painful. So stupid.
Tim JB that says this topic reminds him of episode 4 of The Wood Whisperer.
Oh.
A trip to the lumberyard.
Oh, would you like to reprise your role?
Give me some gum. What?
What? I'm listening to my iPod video.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, I'm watching a podcast.
A podcast. That was in 2006.
That's crazy.
Oh.
All right, so what else we got in the chat?
I put the link in the chat room for anybody that, is possible. I mean, especially if you're brand new to the guild and this is your first guild meeting, welcome. You may not know that there's a free site full of like 300 plus videos out there.
I'm surprised if that were the case.
I don't know.
It's possible. It's possible. But it's also possible that fly was a tarantula.
I think it's possible. I think a lot of people don't realize the deep archive we have
Always
on,
deep,
on
baby.
the website.
It's so deep. Okay, so a question from Nick. He says, you seem to use a lot of alder in your work. Is this due to price, workability, matching, existing home trim, or furniture, color, etc.? Any alder that has taken place since Colorado has been strategic because of the house.
Yeah.
So when the previous owner kind of went through and did a big do-over on all the trim work and everything in the house, everything's alder. Alder doors, alder trim, alder baseboards, alder crown molding in some places. Oh, excuse me, that was really unpleasant.
Oscar, this is his first guild meeting.
Hey, Oscar, what's shaking, dude? So yeah, alder is something that's pretty much throughout the house. So when I make something specifically for the house, especially like the hall tree that I want to make it look built in, I used alder. And funny thing is I covered it with paint. So the other part about alder is not across the country. It depends on where you are. I think mostly on the western half of the US, alder is a really, really inexpensive material to work with. Really. And if you treat it right and finish it correctly, kind of looks like cherry. So it's a good wood for, a disguise if you don't want to spend, $8, $9, however much, $6, $7, $8, $12, $14 a square foot.
Tyler said that is the video, the lumber video is what got him through the first time he went to the lumber yard.
Oh, nice. I love
neat.
hearing that. Okay, I'm catching
well,
up on questions.
if you have a question, Oscar, just drop it in. I'm actually pulling. Just FYI, so as I'm sitting here, I'm getting little pings on my phone from the chat support that I now have on the guild site.
Oh, seriously?
That is not the chat you should be talking to on these guild meetings.
Hey, what's everybody up to? Nicole was like,
no
what?
one's going to hear you except me and my little bot. That is there for questions about projects and not guild meeting chat. So if you want to talk in the
It's also
guild,
a great way to send Nicole just a quick message, be like, hey, what's going on?
well, I meant to tell you, somebody messaged me and said, you look tired. I said, I do? It was talking about you.
Oh, okay.
So I knew what he was doing. But so if you want to participate in the chat, which is, if you're on the guild site, it's below the video, you have to have a YouTube account.
Yeah.
So you need to create a YouTube account to log in for that. So there you go.
Okay.
I do have some questions that I've been pulling, if you don't have any.
I'm current, and I don't see anything that I can answer.
Okay.
So.
Let's see, Max Block Woodworking. Any experience getting the Belforce packages to Canada? I do want to do this year the gaming table, but I was afraid to order from Belforce and get charged taxes and more. I don't know if there's anybody in the chat that's from Canada that have ordered.
I don't know. So maybe someone in the chat.
And again, their customer support is great. So just call them and talk to them. If nobody in the chat has ever ordered from them, I would think they probably get some Canadian orders. Peg said that the Belforce packages they have sent her are always 15 to 20% more than she needed.
Oh, Bell is fantastic.
Yeah.
Like in terms of mail order for wood, giving you extra so that you have more material, giving you, if you get a board that just warps like crazy on you, you call them and they send you a new one. I would not want to be in that business because it's like, it would be, you really have to be customer centric on something like that because, of course wood warps. You're shipping it from where are they? Michigan? All over the country.
Yeah. Canada.
It's gonna move, right? So it's like, how do they warranty that? Well, somehow they do. So that's why we like to give them as much love as possible because we really think they're a really good outfit. So Stumptown had a question. He says, if you had to do a glue up of 3 pieces to get a leg blank that's not going to be turned, how do you cut them from the board to get the best match or avoid 3 board glue ups? Well, certainly if you're doing something, you don't want all those glue joints in there if you can avoid it. But a lot of times we're making a big thick leg, 12 quarter, 16 quarter stock. It's really expensive, not always in the budget, so glue ups usually happen. In that case, a lot of times I'm trying to cut them side by side, right? So normally you're not doing something really wide, so I might be able to find a good 8-quarter board like this, hit it down the middle, and then I would just kind of do a book match fold on those. Or sometimes you want to twist the piece around, move it around so that the grain looks more continuous on the sides where you have to join those pieces. And you're probably, like you said, 3, you're going to have to get a 3rd, which may have to come, if you can't go side by side, may have to come from the next section of the board. That's not ideal, but sometimes that's just what you need to do. So there's really nothing about it. You just have to get the boards that have the same, as close as possible to the same color and grain and try to match those up. It could be really helpful to also put them together and look at the end grain. The end grain is going to tell you a lot about how the leg is going to behave, especially if you plan on cutting it and doing curves and things like that into the leg and shaping it. You might want to pay a lot of attention to that end grain so that you can kind of predict how it's going to respond.
Nick wants to know, how does Alder stuff hold up? I want to do a bookcase, but I don't want to end up as red as cherry.
Oh, well, it's not going to get red. Alder stays the color that it is. You have to dye it if you want it to kind of look like cherry. And most people, when they do an Alder project, they are staining it. It's really popular for a rustic appearance because it blotches like crazy. So if you want to stain it and you really want it to look like clean, nice, quality cherry, you're going to have to get the good stuff, and you're probably going to want to use some kind of preconditioner to get it to that point. But if you don't want it to end up red, then that's good. You can actually use unstained Alder, and it just has a nice, I would call it like a light medium brown color, light to medium.
I really like Alder.
Yeah, and just don't dye it.
Oscar wants to know, should I buy a new edge banding?
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
He also is worried about it getting banged up. It is soft.
Yeah.
So Alder is not the most durable wood out there, and that's just something you have to accept if you're going to use it. It can and will dent fairly easily.
So Oscar just wants to know, should he buy new edge banding or something else? I'm not sure if that's is that...
Maybe he's asking someone else.
Maybe somebody else.
It sounds like we're in the middle of a conversation.
That does sound like a middle of a conversation. Let's see. Chris, where did Chris Yorks? There's a J.K. Dusky has a bandsaw question. I have a 19-inch shop fox with a 3/4-inch blade. The blade does not track straight no matter what. Do you think the blade is too wide? I can't get the gullet over the crown.
I would try a narrower blade. That is one of the problems if you're doing the sort of Snodgrass method of setup and you're trying to center the gullet over the center of the tire. You may not have the space to do that. I've actually backtracked over the years. In the past, I would go for a wider blade, but I've kind of come to realize that anything over a 1/2 inch for most of the stuff that I do is overkill. I don't need a blade that wide. So even on a bigger saw, 1/2 inch is perfectly fine. It's more about the teeth, the shape of the teeth, and the number of the teeth. So I would say, yeah, try a narrower blade and see if you can't nail that Snodgrass method. I feel like you should, be able to get it kind of close, but you may have to adjust for some drift if you aren't able to get that thing centered. And you really don't want a bunch of blade hanging off the back of the tire either. That's no good.
We got a question here from Alec.
Alec McMahon, right?
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of applying Osmo PolyX. I picked up some white Festool Scotch-Brite pads. Are you applying additional coats with the white pad, or apply with a spreader, let set and buff out? So I can try different things. There's lots of approaches to how you do this. The bottom line is you want to get the stuff on, you want to buff it in and let it sort of, you're creating heat and friction and you're driving it further into the surface, and then you wipe it back. Right? So that's generally the process most people are using. So I will typically apply with a spreader, then I'll come back with the white Scotch-Brite, and that really dries it in, spreads it in. Now, you can leave it in that state in some cases. I usually don't, though. I will come back after that with the terry cloth buffer and then buff the whole surface down. And then it just looks clean and consistent. You don't really want to apply the stuff too thick, but I found that at least like Osmo Top Oil can tolerate a thicker application than you might expect. I've even rolled it onto surfaces and it dries just fine.
Oscar said he has cabinets with the edge banding falling off.
Oh.
Should I buy new edge banding to repair?
Yeah, if it's edge banding that's coming off, chances are putting on some new edge banding is a good quick fix. Mm-hmm. You might want to hit the edge with, lacquer thinner or acetone or something. Clean up. You just be careful though. You don't want to damage the finish that's already on there. But what I'm trying to do is get the schmutz that's left on there from the previous edge banding and all the dirt and stuff that's probably on there. You got to get that stuff off. You want something good for the new. I'm assuming you would just get like an iron-on edge banding. You want something that stuff can bind to. So if it's just kind of sticky old adhesive, it's not going to be a really good bond. So I would definitely try to clean it up if you can. Just be careful if you're using thinners and things like that to remove the schmutz. just make sure it doesn't get on the existing finish.
Stumptown has another follow-up question on resawing.
Resaw.
All the way down.
There it is. Another bandsaw resaw question. Should the expectation be some sanding off the saw to final thickness, so within 0.03 or so, or that thing is going on the planer, so cut heavy? That depends on your saw. If you have a well-tuned saw, you probably, for me, I would not feel the need to put it through the planer, but I have a drum sander. So something right off of the saw, probably into the drum sander, just a couple of passes to get those little teeth chatter marks taken care of, and it should be okay. And you might even be able to get a tuned up saw with a really good quality blade or one of those carbide tip blades. Maybe you can do even better than that. I think most people, maybe a very light pass at the planer would be enough. But I always leave more than enough to handle what I need to do, because I'm always concerned about things drifting or the blade kind of, creating a little bit of a belly shape in there. Like you gotta, especially if it's really like expensive material. I hate to waste it, but I'd rather cut myself a thicker piece and be able to smooth it afterwards than to end up with something that's just too thin.
Nick has a question about Festool Surfix oil.
Yep.
What is that?
All right. Festool Surfix oil is basically a finish that Festool never told anyone about.
Really?
Now, they came out with it years ago. I remember they sent me some samples when we were in Arizona.
Okay.
And it's basically comparable to the hard wax oil finishes. A lot of these hard wax oils seem to come out of the UK or just Europe in general, right? And I think they're probably leading the way in terms of like more environmentally friendly finishes. So a lot of these finishes are coming over. I think Festool probably did that a little early, because really this trend of using these hard wax oil finishes just is really picking up steam in 2018, 2019. And this finish came out, and I never heard anyone talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, other than a couple of demo videos, no one used it. No one talks about it, and they still sell the product. And again, nobody knows anything about it, right? But from my experience with it, and I only have very little experience. In fact, most of my experience with it came from visiting Jory's shop, because he was using it at the time.
Interesting.
Jory is experimenting with Osmo, though, because for whatever reason, he was trying something different, and I told him Osmo was pretty good. But it is one of those hard wax oils. They have a couple different finishes, like an outdoor version, and I don't know all the formulations, but the basic stuff is like a typical hard wax oil finish. It's kind of whitish when it applies on the surface. You apply it, buff it in, buff it out. And it's a very close to the wood finish, on par with Rubio and Osmo.
Since we're talking about finishing, Mark says, does Osmo leave a matte finish like Rubio? Also, have you tried the Briwax? Briwax? Hard wax oil yet?
I haven't tried that. I don't know about the Briwax hard wax oil, but I'd like to check it out. Osmo does leave a matte finish just like Rubio. There is a difference though. Osmo builds a film, and let me clarify that. It's a wax film. So I was mentioning before that you could roll it on. Well, guess what you can't do with Rubio? You can't put it on a roller, roll it on, and then leave it there. It's not going to work. Rubio, the way it works, it just needs to bind to that top layer of wood fibers, and it's done. Monocoat, that's the whole point of it. Osmo is something that you can apply multiple coats. The finish will build, but the finish is just a really, really hard wax. And I've actually let some of this finish dry in a thin layer on top of, like a paint can or something, just to see what it does. And it dries hard and smooth. I don't know what magic they're doing in there, but they're doing some black magic voodoo, because it's amazing. Then again, keep in mind, Rubio, 0 VOC. Osmo does have some VOCs.
I just wanted to send a thank you to Patty and Peg, who are helping Jacob in the chat room, trying to find a relatively local resource for, I think it's plywood, maybe.
Something.
He's looking for, it's really expensive around him, so they're.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they're working with it. So, see ya. Thank you, Patty. Cool. Let's see. I thought there was another question right here. Gary.
Okay, Gary says, question. Sorry, reading. I recently acquired 500 board feet of 26-plus-year-old air-dried 6-quarter walnut from a friend's grandfather. Is there a disadvantage to storing it vertically? I have it flat in my shop, but space is limited now. You might find different opinions on this.
Mark would say you could store some of that in his shop.
Yeah, and I'll put it vertically. I mean, I'll store it however you want me to store it. You know, I actually don't think there's anything wrong with vertical storage if the material is dried. If you are still in the process of drying something, you really, I think having weight on it, horizontal is a good way for those boards to stay nice and flat, for it to dry evenly, and then you have space between each board as you build your sticker and stacking method. You build it up, and that's just the conventional way that we dry material. But once it's dried and fairly well acclimated, I think you can store it vertically. When you store a board vertically, you're not storing it at a 45-degree angle where it's just going to be like over time under its own weight. We're almost perfectly vertical when we store it that way.
A lot of David's vertical too. He had
David Marks had a lot of vertical storage.
Vertical.
So when I built the shed in the back for a little bit of lumber storage, it's all vertical. Why? Because vertical is much easier to sort through. It's easier to grab that board in the back, move things around. Yeah, you can just kind of file them in there. It's just easier to deal with. Horizontal, you only have easy access to one board, and that's the one on the top. And then if you have to climb a ladder to get to everything else, there's no ladders to climb with vertical. As long as the boards aren't sitting directly on concrete or directly on a surface that might allow it to wick up moisture, you should be perfectly fine. And in my shed, I've got this great flooring material, plastic. It breathes. It allows, if there is any water, it's got about an inch that it would have to flood before it even contacts the wood. And that's working just fine. And I don't think there's anything wrong with storing it vertically that way.
Ryan says that he's going to ask for a picture when he's at AWFS next week. And I said, please.
I will be happy to do a hover hand for you. Like that.
And
pictures are fine. I love
he wants
pictures.
to know if there's any booths that hobbyists for the first time should go see.
Well, think of the brands we know. Look for all the
gonna
brands.
Be there.
Norm will be at Festool.
Yeah, only one day though. So I think it's Thursday. I saved it.
Norm's busy. He can't be bothered with this crap.
So Norm will be at the Festool booth either Thursday or Friday. Look, I'm sure it'll be plastered everywhere.
Yeah, the thing is, a lot of the brands, not all of them, but a lot of the brands you know and love will potentially be there. You just got to look at the directory and get a highlighter and highlight them all, and then try to make a walking path, because there usually is a little bit of strategy involved in how you get from one thing to another without wasting a lot of walking time. You should stop by the Type On booth, because that's going to be a great place to be.
Free book.
I think Triton will be there, so I'm pretty sure Matt will be there. I don't know, April maybe. She's usually at the shows too. So check those guys out. Fuji Spray is typically at these shows.
Fuji Spray is having a competition that you might judge. I'm not sure, because I told them.
What?
I said we would come by.
Okay.
So I don't know.
So you roped me into something?
No, I don't know. I have to look back at my email on whether or not I did.
We might stop by. Okay, Mark's in. Check.
Let's see. If you're interested in hand tools, there's always some really interesting boutique hand tools.
Yeah.
So is Bloom Tools, are they still around?
Oh, I don't know.
So
that was a long time ago, what you're thinking of.
I know, but I'm just thinking in terms of some of the cooler booths that we went to. And of course, they usually have like the races, the sander races or whatever.
Oh, belt sander races?
I don't know if they still do that or not.
It's been a long time. I don't know. We haven't been to AWFS in a while.
And they always have the fresh wood contest, which is the high school students that do amazing, and all the furniture is out front.
If you want to feel bad about your woodworking skills,
yeah, exactly.
Go there. Steve Haynes says, I love the shaker table project I've made making another with a large chessboard top, 30 inches square. Would you make the legs thicker? The skinny legs might look silly under that big of a top. I think you're right, Steve, and I think you probably should play with this and sketch up a little bit so you could visualize it. The shaker table legs are surprisingly narrow at the bottom. Even as I was building it, I was like, man, this just seems really small. I think it gets down to 5/8 square at the foot, and that's teeny, teeny, tiny. So we recently were trying to design a shaker style, more like a sofa table, a little bit bigger dimension, where, the one that we mentioned with the military display in it. So we designed it initially, and Brian drew it up for me with legs exactly like what you would find on a regular shaker table. And they looked ridiculous. Like at that size, for that scale, it just looked wrong. So I think I bumped everything up by like a 1/4 inch across the board, and everything just looked way better. So if it looks a little bit odd to your eye, that shaker table design truly pushes the limit of how minimal you can go with the thickness. So if you go any bigger than the top that's on that one, which I think is 18 by 18, you go any bigger than that, I definitely would start thinking about adding 1/8 of an inch here and there and just kind of seeing how that impacts the design. But yes, for sure.
I got a question. I have an opportunity to build a gaming table, but I have accessibility issues to place the fully assembled unit into the room it will eventually live in. Is there a good option to build the table and make the legs detachable?
A lot of people have asked this question. A lot of people have done certain things. I've never received like very distinct exact feedback on what they did and how they approached it.
Gotcha.
As designed, it is not meant to be
Detachable.
a knockdown.
Gotcha.
And as I was designing it, I ran into a bit of a wall because I wanted to try to do that for people. I wanted to present a knockdown option, and it just wasn't happening. So yes, it's definitely something you could figure out, but what gets tricky is we have to accommodate the play area. So normally with knockdown furniture, there's stuff you could do in the corners, there's brackets you could buy, but this stuff, when you have that center piece in there, it starts to complicate things a little bit, but it absolutely can be done.
I'd be curious if you're part of the Guild Facebook group.
That'd be a great place to ask.
That would be a really good place to ask that question, because we have a lot of people that have built the gaming table in that Facebook group.
Yep. Is that one of the website questions?
Yeah, they're asking. I'm gonna answer them.
You're gonna establish a habit.
Don't make
here.
it a habit.
You shouldn't even be on that.
I know.
Close it.
It pops up.
And why is it not clear?
Well, it says like a little chat bubble down there, but it doesn't say to ask. Whatever. This is his. I don't know who this is, but they said first Guild live meeting. Do you have an opinion of the Oneida Air Mini Gorilla system? I don't have a lot of space for a larger system yet, so figured it would be a good compromise. If that isn't great, I may try to find more space to get a larger system.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Not familiar with it. I mean, I'm familiar with it. I know what it is. I don't have any experience with it to say how well it's going to work in a small shop situation, but Oneida does make pretty decent stuff. So, look at the use cases they recommend and the CFMs and how many tools you could hook up to it. If it all seems to work on paper, then it's probably a good buy.
There you go. Ben, bye Ben.
Okay, bye Ben. Rich says, I just picked up a Powermatic 15HH planer and my 2-stage cyclone dust collector can't keep up with it. Thinking of adding a chip separator at the planer. Any thoughts? Try it. That's a fairly inexpensive way to possibly divert some of those chips. I don't know what's going to happen ultimately, because if the suction already isn't great and then you put a separator in line, you're going to lose additional suction for the sake of the separator. So it would be an experiment. I don't know if it would work any better for you, but it's probably worth a shot. What else we got?
Yes, the help chat bubble is very prominent. But that's not where I'm pulling questions from the live.
Well, it's supposed to be prominent for shopping purposes.
Yes.
Did we remove it from the interior pages yet?
I thought I did.
One of the things we're trying to do, this is a new tech that we've installed, we're trying to make sure that chat bubble thing
doesn't
is
show up
only on the store pages.
on the
That's
main.
all it should be there for. If you're on the inside of the website looking at projects, going to a live thing, that chat bubble shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
You know what? I guess if you're on mobile, it's all really compressed and you're on the live page.
Yeah.
That's why it's probably.
Yeah.
I bet you all of those people are on mobile.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Let's see. Yep.
Gary wants to know, have you switched West Systems epoxy brand? If so, why? I've been using Total Boat epoxy because they sent me a gallon. And generally I don't ask a lot out of my epoxy. I mix it together and I put it on stuff, and that stuff sticks to itself, and that's fantastic for me. So I've been using Total Boat. I haven't noticed a lick of difference between Total Boat epoxy and West Systems epoxy. I will say though, the Total Boat pumps seem to drip less. All these pumps eventually will drip, and you got to put like a paper towel under them to absorb it, but they drip less than the West System ones do.
I got a question here from Jordan. He asked this question at the top of the show. I was wanting you to do the wood talk. Do you have an exhaust fan for your garage to cut back fumes when finishing? I'm buying a house with an attached garage and want to cut back on fumes.
I don't. I did that in Arizona. Remember I installed that big giant fan.
Well, we got contacted by that one company too, but I haven't heard anything
I
from
wouldn't
them.
even talk about that. That's such an expensive device.
I know.
She's talking about an air filter that actually is not just for particulates, but filters out.
You're the one talking about it.
I know. I'm doing exactly what I said not to do. But it's very cool, but it's also
Yeah.
extremely expensive. So I don't think that's realistic for most of us. So it's not a bad idea. I mean, if you have a really closed-in space and fresh air is hard to get, putting some kind of a fan in to encourage that, not a bad idea. When you do a dust blowout, which I do periodically, I get a leaf blower and I just kick dust off of everything. I want a good tunnel of airflow and I try to create that with a fan. So I close the garage door as much as I can, block everything off but the fan, open that window, and I try to get some cross ventilation. It works pretty well. But generally speaking, have some kind of exhaust fan. If you have fumes building up, it's definitely a good thing. Less of that stuff in your shop, the better. Just make sure you get one that's actually going to do something. If you get like one of those little, you have a big garage and you get one of those little kitchen units, like that's 8 inches, it's probably not going to do much for you.
This is Oscar has another question. I don't know if you can see that. You're just scrolling right there.
Oh, I just got distracted by someone saying the video stopped. Okay. Oscar says, probably asked earlier in the meeting, I joined late, sorry. I live in New Mexico, and I'm finding nice rough slabs are hard to find. I ordered from Oregon. Any suggestions for...
Well, you're in New Mexico. You're not too far from us. Right below. There's a...
Slabs are tricky.
Yeah.
Because if you're in a place where it's hard to find good slab dealers or people who are cutting this stuff, the best resource for this stuff is not a shop. They're so expensive, so ridiculously expensive, and I'll say this even about Austin Hardwoods. They've got some slabs, but they're really overpriced. And by overpriced, I mean, I don't think it's worth it to pay that. If that's what the market will bear, then that's the price, right? So when I say it's overpriced, I just don't think it's worth it. We have CS Woods, right, in Denver. All they sell is slabs. It's insane. This is the place where you need to make a 50-foot conference table out of one board. That's where you go to get it. So expensive. It makes me want to throw up when I go in there.
Yeah.
And I usually do. They have a little bucket in the front, actually,
Usually,
on your way in.
you need to find an arborist.
So if you find an arborist, a lot of times these guys are not that easy to find because they're not out there advertising everywhere, but talk to other local woodworkers, see if you could find somebody who is doing this stuff on the side and just has a side gig of slabbing out, some logs and down, trees from neighborhoods or whatnot, and you might be able to find a local resource that's not too bad. You might be able to find yourself your own little Matt Cremona.
Aw, right in your pocket.
Everyone deserves a mat in their pocket.
Let's see, we're scrolling. Oh wow, you're really...
I'm really behind.
Yeah, you're behind.
Here,
So I
get rid of
probably
it.
just scrolled through a bunch of questions.
I'll go back up.
So here's a question from Tommaso. Mark, have you ever veneered an inlay? Any ideas on how to reduce the edge lip?
Veneered and inlay.
Veneered inlay.
Where's the question?
Right here. Use veneer as oh, sorry.
You forgot very important words that makes this question make sense. I haven't really done much of that, Tommaso. I actually bought years ago. It's still over there, wrapped in green plastic wrap
I see
on
it.
a stick.
Yeah.
That has moved from every shop I've
What
ever
is it?
had from day one. I remember early on in California, we went to Rockler, and they had the pre-made edge banding, not edge banding, the pre-made inlay banding, right? And it's all these cool little shapes. I'm like, yeah, someday I'm going to use this. I still have it, still wrapped up. I haven't touched it. I don't think I'm ever going to use it, but because of the very specific look that you employ when you use that stuff, nothing wrong with it. It's just not my style, but I still hang on to it. Anyway, point is the stuff is so thin, it can be really tricky to inlay that effectively. So I don't have any tips or tricks for you. I've never actually done it.
Well, there you go.
I didn't think it should be that difficult though, because it's pretty consistently wide, so you can get a router bit exactly to that size, and you could run the edge banding down there. But if you're doing like a bigger inlay out of veneer, I imagine it's going to get a little bit tricky because it's just so damn thin.
Charles has a question.
Charles Thompson. You ever get a chance to demo and try M-Powertools sharpening system? When you demo the router guides, that's a big no. They look easier and less fuss than diamond plates with a separate jig for a chisel. Nope. They didn't mention it. I didn't even know they made one.
Yeah.
What do I know? Sorry, Charles. I don't have a good answer for you. I've never used it.
there you go. Let's see. Question from Lark. Is there a particular... Oh, wait. I think he's asking somebody else that. Lark did have a question, but I think I missed it.
Eric wants to know if I have to clean up my epoxy pumps. His have gotten clogged twice. No, never. As long as you don't get contamination, cross-contamination from one pump to the other, they really shouldn't get clogged. I guess maybe if you leave it for a really long time, maybe it does. But I've had West Systems epoxy gallons last me years, and I've never cleaned the pumps. What may happen is the pump would go bad. I've had a pump fail on me, and I had to buy a new little pump set, pop that in there, and it was fine after that. But I've never had them clog. So one thing you got to be careful of is when you're squirting and putting it into whatever your little mixing cup is, just make sure that you don't accidentally get any contact, and that would definitely seize them up pretty quickly.
Worth Effort said that he can recommend a slab person.
Oh.
Birdall sawmill.
Something like that.
And they ship. So there you go.
He also wants to know if I found that gas or electric leaf blower gets the most shavings out. I have no gas yard tools.
None.
I am 100% battery powered or electric on my shop, or not shop, my yard tools. That's the way it is, baby. Anything else before we're out of here?
I think that's all. The kids are
still okay?
Stable.
Someone just says to Jacob says the natives are getting restless. Time to put them to bed. Ours too.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Too. All right, so I think we're going to close it off there. So anyway,
Lark did. He said his basic question was, "What is a good wood to practice dovetails with?" I'm using pine and realizing it stinks.
Yeah, it does. It's best to get something that is of comparable properties to the thing you actually want to cut your dovetails in. I would probably say, like, you want something that's going to respond well to sawing, chiseling, respond similar to other hardwoods that are out there, but not too expensive. Cherry is expensive though. Cherry would be great if you can get a whole bunch of it. Alder, too soft.
Too soft.
You can do alder, but it's a little bit too soft. I might say the softest I would probably go is like poplar. For practice. If you can get some red oak, a lot of times red oak isn't very expensive. If you can get some of that, you're looking at a nice dense species that will saw and chisel fairly well. But stay away from the super soft stuff because that's the stuff that just crushes under pressure. It gives you a very unrealistic idea of what fits and what doesn't. If you're popping pins and tails that are cut too tight and you're trying to knock them together with pine, well, the pine a lot of the times can be like, oh, excuse me, I'm going to get in there. You don't mind, do you? And it squeezes right in with enough mallet hits. But if you try that on something like red oak, you may get a split in your board. So you find out what kind of tolerance you could really get away with by using a more realistically dense material, something closer to the project species you're going to use. Also, don't be afraid, unless we're talking about something crazy and weird, super expensive, don't be afraid to get a couple of small boards of whatever species it is that you want to build that next project from. You can get a lot of practice off of a 12-inch by 3-inch, let's say you're just practicing drawers, right? You get a ton of practice by getting a couple of those. You only do one joint at a time, so you're going to do pins on one, tails on the other. You mess it up, you cut that last 3/4 of an inch off, you go again. You can get a lot of life out of those boards, even if they are a good species. So it may be sacrilege to say practice on good material, but I truly believe the best practice is on material that you would actually build from.
Where's Nick? Whoop, whoop. There we go. Everybody's leaving. But Nick wants you to say hi to his daughter, Vicky.
Oh, I will do that. What's up, Vicky?
Hi, Vicky.
You know I have a cousin named Vicky?
Yeah, I do.
She lives in New Jersey.
Yep.
Hi, Vicky. How old is Vicky? That's what I want to know. When people say to say hi to a kid, there's like, hi, Vicky. Hi.
Oh, she's 16 years old.
Right? And then she's 16, and I'll be like, hey, what's up? How's it going? Go back to Snapchat. Ignore us. All right, what else do we got? I like this. Sean says, secret to demoing dovetails, one really hardwood and one soft because you could pound them together and hide the gaps. It's the Kosman way.
That's awesome.
I thought the Kosman way was...
Oh, she's 6. Nick
Oh,
said she's
okay.
6.
Hi, Vicky. You know, my son is 7.
7.
And our little girl is 3.
3.
You're like kind of in the middle there. You guys would get along swimmingly.
She's thrilled that you said her name.
Vicky, 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 Vicky. All right.
See, you're grooming a little shop helper.
Hopefully. Hopefully.
I love when people post their kids working in the shop.
Oh, it's
and
great.
Vacuuming up.
My favorite is when they post something and it's totally like innocuous and fine, and then the safety stuff starts to happen, and I'm like,
not in the guild group. That doesn't.
Not in
happen.
a guild group.
Not in the community.
Other woodworking public groups.
Yes, other public.
I'm like, come on, guys. Come on. All right.
All right.
I think that's really about it. If you guys have any questions about this, you can hit me up.
And if you do have questions, please use the chat functionality on the website.
Well, yeah, if you have questions
yeah.
about membership, pricing,
Discounts.
you're having problems on the website, all that can be done through that little chat widget.
If you have project-specific questions, those should be done through the project in the comments, because we like to capture that for people that come after.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Okay. If you guys need anything else, just let us know. But I'm going to go put some more ice on this swollen hand of mine.
Thank you for being guild members.
Yeah, thank you very much. Especially if this was your first time at a guild meeting. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We do one every month. All right.
Yep, we're going to have another one. We have a calendar on the guild site. So if you go to the Wood Whisperer Guild, I believe it's woodwhispererguild.com/calendar, right?
I think so.
Yep.
Something like that.
And we put all the meetings there, as well as the release schedule for the projects.
Lark, very quickly, question about sharpening a dovetail chisel. Any special considerations? Well, yeah, especially if you're doing those really tiny ones. Those are not something, see, here's the thing, even though I'm a jig user for sharpening, some tools just have to go freehand, and I don't trust it in a jig. So something like that. I've got a fishtail chisel. I've got a lot of weirdo little chisels that there's just no great way to get them in a jig. 1/8 inch, I mean, you might be able to figure something out. Some jigs grip from the side, some grip from top to bottom. But most of the time for those really weird, delicate things, I'm just figuring out by hand, and I'm just doing my best to flatten the back and just try to hit that bevel as cleanly as I can. And with something that small, it doesn't take a lot of strokes to sharpen that. So
Usually stands by the sink.
in the kitchen, by the sink,
making a mess of the whole area.
watching episodes of Seinfeld on my iPad. Nicole loves it when I do that. We're due, actually. Jay and I were sharpening a little today, and I was like, man, some of these are overdue. All right, thanks everybody.
Bye.
Have a wonderful evening.
This will be up on the site
Soon.
soon.
The nebulous soon.
I'm gonna